No, this isn't Trump's deal. This isn't Biden's deal. This isn't Israel's deal. This is Hamas's deal that Hamas presented in the early stages of February and then openly presented in May, that Biden presented as Israel's very own deal, is the exact same deal.
Breaking news overnight, a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas is still in place, but there is, at the very least, a new delay this morning that everyone is trying to get a better handle on what it really means. Here's what we know at this hour. Israel's cabinet needs to vote to ratify the deal. That has not happened as it was expected to. Israel delayed it, citing last-minute issues. Again, what this now means exactly for the phased-in ceasefire and hostage deal, it's unclear. It's all supposed to begin on Sunday. Under the deal, Hamas has agreed to release 33 hostages in the first phase. Israel agreed to release 1,000-plus Palestinian prisoners. All of that resulting in a 42-day ceasefire with hopes it leads to a permanent one. Let's get to CNN's Bianna Gold.
Wow. Maybe now the media will report on what's going on accurately. I wonder who the responsible party is for messing up the ceasefire negotiations once again. I wonder if it's Hamas or if it is, for the 15th month in a row, Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition. I wonder who is, after like the 8th time that they've actually signed off on an agreement. It seems strange to me. I wonder who is the responsible party.
Rodriguez, she's live in Tel Aviv with much more on this. Bianna, help us understand, what is the status here? What is the latest?
Kate, good morning to you. So all of these things remain rather fluid, but the latest, it does appear to be just a delay in the process of getting a security cabinet and ultimately a party cabinet vote in the government here. As you noted, Prime Minister Netanyahu blaming Hamas for what he says is reneging on parts of the deal. Hamas, for their part, are denying those allegations. Everyone I'm speaking with here still believes, though, that a ceasefire deal will go into place as had been agreed upon beginning Sunday night, where we would see the first hostages in phase 1 of those 33 released here to Israel. Hospitals have been on standby and ready to receive those hostages. In terms of the politics of it all, Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing a lot of headwinds, as we've been reporting now for months, from the far-right elements specifically of his government, of his coalition, who do not want to agree to a deal under these terms. What the latest we have is that Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has said that his party would agree to stay with the coalition through phase 1 of the deal. That is the release of those 33 hostages and the pause in fighting, only if the fighting would be allowed to proceed again after phase 1. So there you just get a sense of how fluid and fragile this deal is right now. But Kate, when it comes to the hostages coming home in phase 1, as you noted, it would be the women, it would be children, it would be men over the age of 50 and those who are critically wounded. And among those women are 5 IDF spotters, are soldiers. Reminder that everyone in Israel is required.
Yeah, Israeli military members are still considered hostages, but Palestinian civilians, 10,000 of them, are considered prisoners, which is, again, doublespeak for the record. Like, just so you understand, it's a part of manufacturing that same exact consent that that the media routinely engages in, right? Like, we're talking women and children that have been falsely detained by the Israeli government. They're being considered as prisoners. The numbers are like 10,000 at this point.
Required to serve in the military. These 5 IDF spotters, all young, the ages of 19 to 21.
Yeah, these children who also are generals, by the way. Yeah, look, you don't understand. These guys are all young. They're just spotters. They're just spotters. Like, no, they're a part of the military. They're a part of the military that's currently engaging in an ethnic cleansing campaign. Like, that's crazy. They're not hostages in that regard. They would be prisoners of war.
Spoke with the cousin of one of them, that Agam Berger's cousin. She is 20 years old. I spoke with her cousin about what this moment may feel like for them when they are finally reunited and why there's a bittersweet sense in the country right now.
She's a beautiful young girl who's been 15.
Like stories exactly like this one. For the record, I'm not discounting that these people have their own personal stories and their personal upbringing and their, you know, and the role they play in the lives of those who love them. Okay. But I also want you to understand that like each individual Palestinian has the exact same story as well. So remember what the media in the Western world especially pays attention to and how they treat Israeli occupying force soldiers that are held captive versus the thousands of women and children that have been falsely imprisoned in perpetuity by the Israeli government in the maintenance of an apartheid and how they get presented. This framing is very important because it reinforces the humanity of each individual Israeli, and it actually reinforces the dehumanization of each individual Palestinian. Your hatred of Israel blinds you. What point do you feel like I am blinded? Like, what do you think? What do you mean by that? Because I already said that, of course, every single Israeli that's being held captive is a human being with lives and loved ones, okay, that miss them, okay? I get that. I understand that. But do you think that each individual Palestinian that is in the same exact predicament, if not worse predicaments overall in terms of like legal permissibility, in terms of international human rights and Israel's routine violation of that at the behest of maintaining an apartheid state? Is your argument simply that I hate Israel and that's why I recognize Palestinians as humans? Perhaps. I wish to run into you one day in the street and break both of your kneecaps. Hasan Piker says, Xander Macha. Good luck, brother. Good luck on that. Not all of us agree with our government. Wait, what? I never said that. What are you talking about? I've never said that all Israelis 100% agree with their government. You just made that up. Also, the person who said this, you will not be doing that. You won't be doing that at all, as a matter of fact. If anything, if you were to actually see me out in the wild, okay, you would probably behave like a fan and try to get a photo and say how much you actually appreciate my commentary. You wouldn't dare to try to behave in the way that you claim that you would. At most, you would be in a Discord server talking about how you were going to quote unquote troll me and how much you were pissing your pants in that moment. But yeah, once again, going back to this other chatter, not the one who wants to break my kneecaps or whatever. I don't maintain this position. I don't know why you think I've said this. Does it make you feel like it's a better argument that you can present? Is that what it is? You know, I'll wait for your response. But a lot of this conversation basically devolves into that. Like the notion that Palestinians are not human and only Israelis are the real humans in this equation. Palestinians are faceless, lifeless, hive-minded, parasitic forces that are constantly threatening the existence of the real humans in the region, the only people in the region. Okay? And many people's primary assumption is that, and they just operate off of that. You know what I mean? So much. If you were to potentially go back as an Israeli, completely support better future for the Palestinians, people and their families, they are people just like us. It's important you remember that many of us do. Yeah, except I do know that. Okay. I don't know if, your perspective is commonly shared, because there is polling conducted inside of Israel regularly where, many Israelis agree with the consistent genocide, the offensive genocidal siege that Israel has implemented, the Israeli occupying forces implemented on the Gaza Strip. But having said that, if you were in here long enough, you'd recognize that I talk to my Israeli chatters with regular frequency, and I even talk to members of the Knesset, and even talk to conscientious objectors, and rely on Israeli sources of investigative reporting with regular frequency once again. So just so you understand, there are plenty of Israeli chatters in here right now in this community. I'm probably one of the only places where they have access to even watching the likes of Al Jazeera, for example, since your government banned it. Anyway, but yeah, having said that, this is not a, you're arguing against a thing that I don't believe. Let's continue.
Months in the hands of people that we know committed the worst atrocities against women in one day. We know what they did on October 7th. We also know from released hostages who came home what they did to hostages in captivity. That's the biggest fear. The physical aspect of it, and I don't need to go into detail. I think everyone who's watching understands what that fear means. But more importantly, the mental and emotional aspect of what kind of trauma something like that can do to a young girl who's 20 years old, who has her whole life ahead of hers.
All right, Bianca Golodriga for us in Tel Aviv. Bianca's going to be all over it. A lot of developments could be coming on this today.
David Sanger, let me start with you. You, of course, have been covering this deal closely. Is there anything to this last-minute hiccup with the Israeli?
I thought you'd ban the kneecap, dude. Nah, I mean, I'm not afraid of it. And I'm sure issuing a direct threat to the streamer is a site-wide ban anyway, so I suspect that regardless of whether or not I ban that person, they probably will get banned across the board from Twitch permanently. Yeah, see? Very stupid thing to do, honestly. We're going to talk about the reporter that was dragged away from the State Department briefing in a second.
Cabinet, how serious is that here?
It could be. We don't know yet. I do know that up to the last few hours before they announced the agreement yesterday, Casey, Hamas was coming up with sort of last-minute things they were putting on the table. It's a very usual technique on their part, and the question is, can that be put down?
This is just an alternative reality. They are existing in a totally different plane of existence. Okay? It's completely, simply put, this is just a lie. Okay? That's it. It's just a lie. You're in opposite world. It feels as though you are just lying and going along with what the State Department has said over and over again, in spite of what people can see with their own two eyes, right? It's such a weird thing to do over and over again when, it's the easiest thing to disprove. The notion that it's actually Hamas that's ruining these ceasefire negotiations and not Israel is ridiculous. It is completely made up. It is the exact opposite. I cannot stress this enough. And we have shown numerous examples, time and time again. The narrative being pushed today by Israel is that Hamas is reneging on the terms of the Gaza agreement, but as it has been from the start, it is actually Netanyahu. The Prime Minister's office announced on Thursday morning that the IDF would not withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor during the first phase of the hostage deal on Thursday morning. Contrary to misleading reports, Israel is not withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor. Israel will remain in Phase A in the corridor for an entire 42-day period, the statement said. The scope of forces will remain at its current size, but will be deployed differently, encompassing outposts, patrols, observations, and control along the entire corridor. So they won't let the Rafah border open, okay? They won't let Gaza and Egypt take control over their own borders, which is a non-starter for understandable reasons. If you still control the humanitarian aid that's going into the Gaza Strip through the Rafah corridor, through the Philadelphia corridor, through the Rafah border, you're not withdrawing. You're not retreating at all. The scope of forces will remain at its current size, but will be deployed differently, encompassing outposts, patrols, observations, and control along the entire corridor. During Phase A, starting on the 16th day, negotiations will begin on ending the war. If Hamas does not agree to Israel's demands for ending the war, achieving war's objectives, Israel will remain in the Philadelphia corridor on the 42nd day and consequently beyond the 50th day. In practical terms, Israel will remain in the Philadelphia corridor until further notice, the statement concluded. Now, this right here is unacceptable for understandable reasons. This is not a cessation of hostilities. This is not a ceasefire. And I'll give you evidence to understand if you are still confused by this process. It's like Vladimir Putin saying, no, you don't understand. We are still going to maintain troop presence along virtually every part of Ukraine. Like, we're going to shut off Ukraine from Poland and many other bordering nations, and we are going to maintain troop presence to ensure that we completely encircle Ukraine. Now, of course, Ukraine is a much larger country, and it's not like a concentration camp that Israel has maintained for the past 76 years. So obviously, it's virtually impossible militarily to even do such a thing. But like, it is ridiculous. If Vladimir Putin was like, "No, you don't understand. Like, we are going to literally do that," everyone would say, "Yeah, that's insane. You are not. That is not a cessation of hostilities at all." Okay. What's Trump's play? Just pretend Israel's acting in good faith and take the W? I mean, I don't think he can. I don't think he can get away with it, just like Biden couldn't get away with it. So who knows? We'll see. We'll see how Trump differs from Biden on this. At least he understands who he's supposed to be pressuring in this regard. You know what I mean? So far, with the way that the negotiations have actually moved, and I don't know if there's a carrot and a stick, where the carrot is basically you can go back to bombing Gaza or annexing the West Bank later down the line, but you know, and the stick being if you don't actually pull this ceasefire before my inauguration, I'm going to literally stop giving you weapons. But one thing remains clear: if you want to understand the truth of the matter, it is obvious that it's not Hamas that's ruining the ceasefire negotiations. They have said yes to this since July 2nd. Okay. It is the same. It is a version of Trump warns Israeli officials against restarting hostilities in Lebanon, reports the Jerusalem Post. Crisis between Israel and the U.S. Trump warns against collapse of Lebanon ceasefire exclusive. Sources close to the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump have reportedly conveyed a stern warning to Israeli officials. Israel, since last night, have increased their bombings and targeting of civilians, according to on-the-ground press. They're telling civilians to be even more careful than usual. Yeah, no, I know that. That could be two different things, though. That could be because Israel always increases hostilities before the last second of the ceasefire, which is gross, but that is expected. What? Are you jealous? Asmongold is getting a bunch of clout of Elon's weekly e-beef number 84. Why would I be jealous of that? I personally love that they're beefing. I covered it earlier. It was awesome. I don't care about the quote unquote clout that Asmongold gets out of it. I already covered it. It was great. I'm a fan. It's free viewers. I mean, okay. That's a very weird and cynical way to approach the subject matter from your perspective. In any case, yeah, more people recognize that Elon Musk is a fraudulent, narcissistic, thin-skinned man-child is good in my book. It's A-okay. Anyway, you cannot convert them, brother. Read the Shahada. So much swab. What? I have no idea what you're talking about.
But the bigger question is, who's right in this dispute between the two? And the answer is really both. So the deal is essentially what President Biden laid out in May. It also, you may notice, this is January. So, you know, that deal did not happen. And I think the fact that they did link up so well, and that Steve Witkoff, who was President Trump's incoming Mideast advisor, was out there in lockstep with Brett McGurk, who was President Biden's equivalent for that and has worked for Republican presidents as well. I think that made the difference because they were able to go to Netanyahu, send Witkoff and say, this is the deal that Trump wants. And I think that sort of helped put it over the marker.
David, Tom Malinowski, who's a former Democratic congressman, he put out a very interesting thread on Twitter, the first of which says that this was Biden's deal, but as much as I hate to say it, he couldn't have done it without Trump. Not so much Trump's performative threats to Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Hamas is already under maximum pressure, okay? It's called, you know, being genocided. There is no more pressure that you can put on Hamas than genocide, okay? You're genociding the Palestinian population in its entirety. There is no more pressure in that regard. That's the maximum thing that you can do. The difference here is Trump actually went to the responsible party and applied pressure to the responsible party. Also, why would you want to pressure? How would you pressure Hamas on a deal that they have presented since May, a deal that they signed off on since July? It makes no sense. Trump didn't do shit. Everyone's gullible suddenly. Hello? Wait, what? No, you have to understand. You have to understand. Trump did do things, most likely very bad things. Okay, but in the interim, something that had to be done, which was to apply pressure to Benjamin Netanyahu's side. And that's the only reason why Israel was like, all right, we're going to vote for this. We're going to pass the ceasefire. But now Benjamin Netanyahu's going back on it. The situation right now, if J-Post is right, Trump told Bibi he'd let Israel violate the ceasefire, keep sending arms, and lift sanctions on extremist/settlers. Despite these guarantees, Bibi still refused to sign the ceasefire, publicly says he wants to effectively nullify it by changing its terms to keep troops in Gaza until Hamas surrenders, and lies about Hamas sabotaging it. The ball is in Trump's court now. Exactly. No, I don't disagree with this. I agree with this. It's entirely dependent on what Trump does from this point on until the inauguration. Will he actually hold Benjamin? It's also entirely dependent on the ceasefire, accepting whether or not Israel will accept the ceasefire. We'll find out tomorrow, okay, or in a couple hours, like I guess like 12 hours or so. But what you have to understand here is that Trump's pressure that led to Benjamin Netanyahu saying he was going to sign off on this, that led to Joe Biden coming out and saying the deal is done, Israel actually signed off on it, is yet another instance where like some additional factor applied extra pressure for this conversation to move. Okay. Now, does that mean that weapons transfers were on the table? I don't know. But your phrasing makes it seem like Trump personally did something and cares. No, I've never said that Trump cares about Palestinians. I've always maintained the position that Donald Trump does not care about Palestinians and most likely cut a side deal, which, I'm speculating that he most likely cut a side deal with Benjamin Netanyahu, whether it be a permanent annexation of the West Bank or whether it be even in the interim period, a potential to throw the ceasefire negotiations aside. But the problem here is that outside of that side deal, there was definitely additional pressure applied. Now, we'll see if that pressure worked, okay? If that pressure worked, we will see come tomorrow. But the only thing in this equation that was new was basically Donald Trump and Witkoff appearing as like the spokesperson for Donald Trump.
But his willingness to tell Bibi bluntly that the war had to end by January 20th. And he essentially goes on to say that while Biden did a great job working with European leaders, he did not bring the sort of thuggery to the table that is required in the Middle East. Do you think Malinowski's right about this?
I think he's absolutely right. And the reason that I would say that is, first of all, the relationship between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu is poisonous, would be a polite phrase for the term, okay? And
no, this isn't Trump's deal. This isn't Biden's deal. This isn't Israel's deal. This is Hamas's deal that Hamas presented in the early stages of February and then openly presented in May. The deal that Biden put forth in July 2nd that seemingly everyone was in line with, that Biden presented as Israel's very own deal, is the exact same deal. Okay. Benjamin Netanyahu throughout this process has added additional poison provisions into it in an effort to continue bombing Gaza, in an effort to refuse to negotiate. If you want to cut this deal, it requires one singular phone call. Not a phone call to Hamas envoys, a phone call to Benjamin Netanyahu. I've been saying this for months. The party that is ruining this deal and refusing to abide by it is not Hamas. It's Benjamin Netanyahu. It's Israel. And the reality of the matter is, it's not even an exact comparison to Ronald Reagan, because Reagan was dealing with foreign adversaries, not with Israel. Okay? You don't understand. That's what makes the situation so much worse for Joe Biden in terms of how he chose not to deal with the problem and only escalate it. Because Israel would not exist without our unlimited support, without our unlimited political cover, and without our unlimited weapons transfers. Israel would run out of bombs a week in, okay? Maybe a month maximum. I have repeated this true fact over and over again for the past 15 months, okay? But unfortunately, the way that the media covers this is so built on top of this falsehood that they are repeating from the State Department that there's numerous reporting to suggest is completely incorrect. okay, that people just simply cannot comprehend that it is Israel that is the spoiling party. So therefore, it is Israel that you have to apply pressure to. And in this case, you have endless amounts of power to apply pressure to Israel. Endless amounts of power. Because Israel is our colonial vestige. Israel is our weapon to wield in the region. That's it. That's what makes it so much worse for Biden. Especially because Biden tries to maintain, or Democrats try to maintain, this like aesthetic that they are peace lovers, but simply are held up and they can't get both sides to agree to this ceasefire negotiation, when in reality it's not both sides that aren't agreeing, it's Benjamin Netanyahu that's not agreeing.
Second, the fact that they were able to send Witkoff, not Brett McGurk, but Witkoff, on Saturday to see Netanyahu and say, President Trump wants this resolved before Inauguration Day, in part so that it's not on him to go, be the one who was squeezing the Israelis. I don't think the Israelis would have made the deal. I think they would have just said, well, let's just see what we get out of Trump.
Mike Dubke?
Well, first, on a serious matter, what's amazing to me is America matters. I mean, that's at the end of the day, what other country, we can have this argument about Trump or Biden, but what other country can step into an international conflict and really have the level of influence that we did in this? So to David's point, I mean, America matters. On the more of a lighthearted side, I'm sick and tired of these two arguing about golf scores. I'm sick and tired of these two arguing about who mattered. The fact that these two gentlemen got together, told their people to get this done, that's what's important here. I wish they would just both take the victory and be happy that we have a ceasefire after all these months.
Yeah, Haima, what do you make? I mean, obviously, President Biden, we have seen, clearly is not ready to exit, especially the world stage. It's a
I don't know. I mean, I can't see this as anything but just like people lying in the most Reddit. The Reddit phenomena that I talk about all the time, which is like, sometimes you'll see someone like basically comment something that is completely incorrect. And then there's like 11 subsequent comments replying to that, making jokes about that lie. But we've now established that lie as like the truth. And people are just circle jerking around this like abject lie. That's precisely what's happening on CNN this morning with Casey Hunt. Like, not a single person on this panel is going, hey guys, it kind of doesn't make sense that this deal looks identical to the deal that Hamas presented. It kind of doesn't make sense that, like, for the past, I guess, 15 months, or at least for the past 8 months, Biden has claimed that this is his deal, even though initially he said it was Israel's deal, and Israel itself never actually agreed to its own deal. Like, what are we supposed to make of this? It's like not that complex. It's not that complex at all. Many people can see the truth in this regard. So I don't know what purpose this serves in terms of just like still in this final hour, these guys are still operating on this false notion that it's actually the pressure that must be applied to Hamas because they're just not willing to agree to the terms of these, willing to agree to the ceasefire negotiation. It doesn't make any sense. All you're doing is trying to, I guess, use the crumb of credibility that you have still with like 90-year-olds into believing a false notion, into believing something that is patently untrue that you can openly see. It's so strange. It's definitely strange, especially happening at a time when obviously like mainstream media has lost so much credibility.
Place that he has always really, he's valued his role as, even when he was in the Senate and he was on the Foreign Relations Committee, he clearly doesn't want to give all the credit to Donald Trump. But I will say the people that work for him have been willing to do it.
Yeah, look, I agree with Mike. I think people across the country are sick of the back and forth. I think people want to see some bipartisanship. And so for the start of this new administration, I think this is a good sign that there could be some glimmers of hope for bipartisanship. But secondly, look, I think President Biden and Vice President Harris have been clear about their stance on this, and they've worked very hard to get here. And so, yes, I do think Donald Trump helped push this over, but I don't want to take the credit away from the the president and the vice president. They were very clear about this deal. They were very dogged about it. They wish this would have happened in May, but it did not. But I think you're right. President Biden's having a hard time this week. He has a couple of days left in office. He's enjoyed being president. It was not his choice to not be president. Let's just be honest about that. But it's going to be tough for him as he watches Donald Trump take office again. You remember when he took office a couple years ago, he wanted to save this country's soul. He doesn't really feel like he's done that. So I do think there's some things that he's grappling with over the next couple of days that are going to be tough for him.
David, one thing that has hung over this deal is, of course, if assuming that this stays on track and we see these hostage releases on Sunday, is going to be the imagery and the parallels for an outgoing President Biden with an outgoing President Carter. Jimmy Carter reflected a little bit on this dynamic back in an interview he did in 2015. I want to watch that and then we'll talk about it.
I hadn't been to bed for 3 days and 3 nighs. I had just been negotiating with the Iranians and with 12 other countries to get the release of our hostages who had been in prison for more than a year. And at 9 o'clock that morning, they were already in the airplane ready to take off from Tehran. But the Ayatollah Khomeini kept them there until after I was no longer president.
And your colleague Peter Baker in his analysis mentioned that this has been hanging over this is something the White House is very aware of. The president's aides have been very aware of. How does this kind of echo today?
Well, first of all, this could well spill into Monday. It could spill beyond. Hamas at various moments made the argument they weren't certain where all of the hostages were. The second reason that this may hang over is the great thing about the Jimmy Carter tape that you showed there is all the hostages walked off the plane.
Right.
And here we know that of the numbers that we're hearing, not everyone is alive. And some of those hostages are going to, come back as remains. And so this is going to be both joyous and soul-crushing at the same moment. And it's also going to make you wonder, had the deal been able to come together earlier, how many of those lives could have been saved?
The most necessary thing.
The Israelis claim Hamas reneged on parts of the ceasefire deal. Hamas officials say it isn't true. This comes amid the backdrop of internal political pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Statements.
Here's Trey Yingst, who is the chief foreign correspondent for Fox News, reporting on the matter. I'm sorry, but the fact that Trey Yingst at Fox News is saying this from Tel Aviv and he is outflanking CNN is so unacceptable. Okay?
This is an important update. There is a crisis as it relates to the ceasefire agreement reached last night. The Prime Minister's office here in Israel just released a statement saying Hamas reneged on parts of the agreement reached with mediators and Israel in an effort to extort last-minute concessions. The Prime Minister's office goes on to say there will be no cabinet vote until mediators inform Israel that Hamas has agreed to all parts of the deal. This is significant, and it comes amid the backdrop of increased domestic political pressure against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whose own finance minister Bezalel Smotrich threatened to leave the government if a deal was reached.
Never mind. He didn't actually say what I think he said in here.
Hamas reneged on parts of the agreement reached with mediators and Israel in an effort to extort last-minute concessions. The Prime Minister's office goes...
He tweeted out something different. The Israelis claim Hamas reneged on parts of the ceasefire deal. Hamas officials say this isn't true. Why didn't he mention that in the... Yeah, he didn't mention that at all. He tweeted it. This part does not exist in the video. Interesting. Anyway, if Netanyahu's government is threatening to dissolve it, then who is that is reneging on it? It's so dumb. I know. That's what's so frustrating about it. It's like, it's so glaringly obvious. It is so obvious who the spoiling party is. I saw a tweet from 2012 on the timeline earlier. Someone had brought it up again where this person was saying, like, hold on, let me see if I can find the tweet. I want to do it justice by just telling you exactly what the tweet was. Raphael Shimonov reposted this. Emily F. in 2012 says, Palestinians don't want peace, in air quotes, but Palestinians celebrate the ceasefire while 70% of Israelis are against the ceasefire. All the way back in 2012. Tell me who wants peace. Like, even on the population side,